So what is going to happen when you die? So if you don't know this, as Catholics, we believe in something called the particular judgment and the general judgment. And this is basically, this comes from the Bible, right? So this isn't like just made up stuff that some people allegedly think the Catholic Church made up. But we will be judged both right after our death and at the end of time, we get judged again. Now, if you are judged at your particular judgment, if you go to heaven, you stay in heaven. Like, that's not something that happens, that gets reversed at the general judgment, right? So whatever you get your particular judgment, you're going to get at the final judgment as well. Now, why do I bring this up? Well, the reason why is because today I was kind of reflecting on, just my state in life. And I feel like a lot of guys who are watching might be either fathers or want to be fathers. That's the vocation that most people are going to be choosing, unless you're going to be a priest or religious, which, by the way, is great. That's awesome. But I feel like most guys watching are probably, called to that, or they are that. And one of the things that I have to remind myself constantly, so this video is not just for anyone watching, this is for myself as well, is meditating upon how we are going to be judged at the end of our life, right? A lot of times we kind of associate like our success and, in like the material things, or even just like semi-material things, like how many friends you have or the impact you make in your community, equating to your righteousness before God. When in reality, the thing that we're going to be judged on the most as fathers is based upon what our vocation is, right? So the vocation is super important, because a lot of guys, myself included, have caught into this trap thinking that we are just simply the provider, right? Like the provider is like the most important role we have. And it is an important role, but forgot about the other one, and that's protector, right? Provide and protect. That's the role of a father in the home. And I think that, for me, I have to remind myself constantly that, like, look, my obligation is to work enough so that way I can spend the maximum amount of time with my kids. And, my wife. Like, they are the most important people in the world. If I spend all this time evangelizing and helping other people grow in their faith, but I don't do it in my own home, that's a big problem, right? That's like putting the cart before the horse, so to speak. And, this is something that I've often struggled with. I've often struggled with workaholism. So if you guys are someone like that, then I sympathize with you. And the advice, many priests have given me before was to tend your own garden. Now, ironically, I moved into a house about 9 months ago, and we do actually have a garden. We had a house that inherited a garden, and as I'm gardening with my wife, like, we're starting to see like how much work it actually takes to maintain a garden, especially in Texas heat when it's like 90 degrees, and things die really easily because of the heat. And it's almost it's giving me a tangible way to understand what the priests were telling me, which is, if you ignore your own garden, but you try to help other people's gardens, kind of similar to what Christ said about, take the plank out of your own eye, it's not going to be helpful to you. Plus, at your particular judgment, God's going to judge you based upon your vocation, right? Like, how well did you live out your vocation? This is why Saint Joseph is the perfect example of the perfect man, because he didn't go out, preaching. He protected the Holy Family, right? And that's like the most noblest, the most important thing. And there's no words of him in Scripture, right? But there are actions, right? He took actions. He got up in the middle of the night. And I can tell you this, there was a time when, and I still struggle with this too, where, especially with young kids and you have to wake up in the middle of the night. I've been talking to dads about this too, where you have to get up, they're crying, you have to change them, you have to feed them, things like that. And it's exhausting, right? Especially as a parent, it can be exhausting. One of the things that's really helped me is right before I go to bed is I read from, I believe, the Gospel of Matthew, the chapter in which Joseph gets woken up by the angel and says, hey, you have to, flee, take the child and the mother to Egypt, right? And did Joseph say, I want to sleep in, I'm tired? No, he got up right away because there was an imminent threat and imminent danger. Now, I have to remind myself that whenever I have to wake up in the middle of the night and think about, okay, what would St. Joseph do? Kind of like what people say, what would Jesus do? Like, what would St. Joseph do, right? And by honoring Saint Joseph, you're honoring Jesus, right? Because Saint Joseph, he picked, we say that, Mother Mary is the perfect woman, and she's the perfect creature. She's immaculate. And God chose his own mother, right? Think about, why wouldn't he pick like the best mother? Same thing for Saint Joseph. Why wouldn't he pick the best foster father, right? Why wouldn't he pick the best father to raise him on earth? Which is why Saint Joseph, arguably is like, he's right beneath Our Lady. Like, he's like the most holiest of saints. Yes, yet he was a father. He wasn't a priest. He wasn't a religious. He wasn't a bishop. He was a father. He was a dad, right? And he raised Jesus Christ, right? You got to think about how, because Christ had two natures. He had man and God, right? And you better believe that, the way Jesus talked, the way his accent probably, the way he presented himself. I often meditate upon this, is that a lot of the parables that Jesus says, especially about building things, like, right, like, laying a foundation, it kind of feels like he was getting that from his experiences with Saint Joseph, right? It feels that way. And read these parables carefully, and you're going to see there's a lot of analogies that kind of relate to construction and building things. But yeah, the reason why I want to make this video today is it's a reminder for myself, right? Because I feel like I need to remind myself too. But it's a reminder to all men, is like, look, we are given such a short amount of time. And I know this, like, because my kids are growing up fast. And the most important thing we do as fathers is try to help our children see us in a way that helps them grow in their love for God the Father. We see this in society. There's such a brokenness with fatherhood. And it really comes down to fathers not being present. Like, your simple presence is so important. And I'm seeing that now more and more, like, that, if I'm working, if I'm doing anything, I should only do it to the extent of that it provides just enough. Like, how much can I get away with providing just enough without having to sacrifice a gargantuan amount of times for family, right? And I get it. Like, some people, like, it's the nature of your job, and it's the nature of it. But you gotta ask yourself this question. Is it worth the lifestyle? Like, is it worth to live on a little less, make a little less money, but spend more time with your kids? And I've come to that conclusion, that it's actually more important that we do that. It's easier I'd rather sacrifice things and get to spend more time with my children than have a lot of stuff, right? And it's important. Like, obviously you got to provide, you got to do things for your family and give your family a decent life, right? A comfortable life. But at the same time, what is Christ going to judge us on? Well, he's going to judge us on the state of our soul, of course, but also how did we nurture the souls of those around closest to us, particularly our wife and our children, in that order, by the way. Some people think that the children are the most important in the home life. It's actually your spouse, okay? Your spouse is actually the most important, then come the children. And a lot of people have this backwards. They think that, I got to sacrifice everything for the children and ignore my wife or ignore my husband. And that is not true. That is disordered. That's backwards, right? First, it's God above. It's God, it's yourself, then it's your spouse, and then it's your children. That's the proper order of patriarchy. But that's all I have to say for you guys today. I know it wasn't really too much of a martial arts related topic, but I do think it's important. And I actually kind of thought of this because I was watching an interview with Michael Bisping and Cubs Swanson. Fascinating interview. I highly recommend you guys watch it. It's about coaching and things like that. And he was mentioning a story. I think Cub Swanson was mentioning a story about how some guys, when they're fighters, they kind of have this attitude of, like, they go to the grocery store and the clerk asks their ID and they're like, "You don't know who I am," and then Michael Bisping was like, a lot of fighters have to realize, like, this is like a tiny portion of your life. Like, being a fighter is not your entire life. And I think that's somewhat related to us men as fathers, is that, like, your work is not your whole life. Your work is just a small portion of your life, and it doesn't identify who you are. I think for a long time, especially when I was living like a pagan, I was associating my martial arts as, like, this is who I am. Like, and I even met instructors who said the same things, like, I can't remove myself from this because this is, like, who I am as a person. And after getting so many injuries and like having to not train for a while, it kind of put me into a depression. Like I just kind of like, and to an extent, if I don't train for a while, sometimes that does happen. Like if I hurt my knee or hurt my shoulder or whatever, and I can't train, I get a little depressed. And I think it's because I've associated so much of what I do with who I am as a person, and that's not that's not at all true. And this is what another priest told me. It's like, you know, you are not what you do. It's who you are. It's relationship, right? That's who you are. You are a child of God first and foremost, and anything you do outside of that is really irrelevant, right? It's really not as important as you think it is, which is why prayer, it's the most important thing you do, because it's the highest form of the spiritual works of mercy, like praying for the living and the dead. It's one of the most important things that we do, and because without prayer, without grace, we can do nothing. Like what Christ say, like without me, you can do nothing, right? And if we center ourselves around Christ and around God, around His will, we're actually going to be way happier. We're going to be way more fulfilled. And by the time we are judged, right, we're doing things according to the right state. Now, obviously, this is easier said than done. It takes constant reminders. I have to remind myself constantly. A prayer that I've been saying every day that I recommend you try. It's called the choleric's prayer. If you don't know the 4 temperaments, I'm pretty sure I'm choleric. But it's called the Litany of Patience. A fascinating prayer. I think a lot of dads and a lot of fathers should read it, because it's really important. It kind of puts things in perspective, if you know what I mean. So, hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day. Viva Christo Rey. God bless you all. See you all next time.